In the earliest moments of emotional tension, many avoidant individuals don't respond the way people expect. Instead of engaging in conflict or explaining their feelings, they often go quiet. This silence is not random. It is a protective reaction shaped by how they process emotional pressure. When emotions rise too quickly or feel overwhelming, their nervous system tends to interpret it as something unsafe or consuming. So rather than staying in the situation and trying to work through it in the moment, they instinctively step back. It's not always about lack of care, but more about how they regulate emotional intensity when they don't feel grounded. This reaction can feel sudden to the other person, almost like a switch turning off. But internally, it is usually a slow build-up of discomfort they haven't been able to express. The cold shock moment is essentially their inner system choosing distance over escalation, giving them space to regain control of their emotional state. When an avoidant person experiences emotional intensity too quickly, their first reaction is often withdrawal, not conversation. It can look sudden from the outside, but inside it is usually a gradual build-up of discomfort they don't fully express in words. They start feeling emotionally crowded, even if the intention from the other person is love or closeness. Their mind interprets that pressure as something they need space from in order to regain balance. Instead of engaging in conflict or explaining what they feel, they often go quiet because silence feels safer than escalation. It gives them time to regulate their emotions without having to respond under pressure. This is not always rejection in the way people assume, but a coping mechanism shaped by how they handle emotional overwhelm. The more urgency they feel from the other side, the more they retreat inward. In that state, distance becomes their way of restoring control and emotional stability without confrontation. When an avoidant person feels emotionally pressured to respond, explain, or match intensity faster than they are comfortable with, something subtle begins to happen inside them. They don't usually react with confrontation or emotional expression. Instead, they begin to reduce their availability, not out of punishment, but out of self-protection. The tease people often notice is inconsistency. One moment they are present, responsive, even warm, and the next they become distant or quiet. This isn't a calculated game, but a shift in how safe they feel in the emotional environment. When things start to feel too demanding or emotionally fast-paced, their instinct is to slow everything down by pulling back. The payoff, from their perspective, is not emotional connection in that moment, but relief. Silence becomes a way to reduce internal pressure. By not responding immediately, not explaining every feeling, and not engaging in emotional escalation, they regain a sense of control over themselves. What makes this confusing for the other person is that distance often appears right after closeness. That contrast creates uncertainty, because it feels like emotional withdrawal is replacing connection, but internally, it is more about regulation than rejection. The more someone pushes for clarity during this phase, the more the avoidant person feels the need to retreat further, not because they want to hurt anyone, but because emotional intensity without space feels overwhelming to process in real time. When people observe an avoidant partner becoming distant, they often interpret it as emotional disinterest or lack of care, but in many cases what looks like detachment is actually emotional overload happening internally. Avoidant individuals can feel things deeply, but they don't always process those emotions in a way that is visible or expressed outwardly. When emotional closeness increases too quickly, or conversations start carrying too much expectation, their internal system can become overwhelmed. Instead of expressing that overwhelm, they tend to withdraw into silence. From the outside, this silence feels like rejection, but internally it is often a way to calm their nervous system and create emotional space. This is where misinterpretation becomes very common. The other person sees reduced communication and assumes the connection is fading. Meanwhile, the avoidant person may still care, but they are trying to reduce the emotional pressure they feel in that moment. They are not always stepping away from the person, but from the intensity of the situation. Their silence is not always empty. It is often full of processing, thinking, and self-regulation. But because they don't verbalize it, the other side is left filling in the gaps with assumptions. That gap creates confusion, tension, and emotional distance on both sides. Over time, this misunderstanding can grow stronger if space is not respected. What could have been a temporary emotional reset becomes a deeper withdrawal. The key is recognizing that silence is not always absence of feeling, but sometimes an attempt to manage feeling that has become too heavy to express. A mid-video pause or reflection point is often where real understanding starts to form, especially in relationships involving avoidant patterns. At this stage, the focus shifts away from trying to analyze the other person and moves toward looking inward. Instead of asking why someone is distant or inconsistent, it becomes more useful to notice how you personally respond to that distance. Many people fall into the habit of trying to close emotional gaps quickly. When they sense withdrawal, they reach out more, ask more questions, or try to restore closeness immediately. But this urgency can unintentionally increase pressure on someone who already feels overwhelmed. The reflection here is not about blame, but about awareness of emotional pacing on both sides. This is also the moment where people are encouraged to recognize patterns rather than isolated events. One message, one silence, or one withdrawal doesn't define a relationship, but repeated cycles often do. Noticing those cycles helps in understanding whether the connection is stable or constantly shifting between closeness and distance. The important shift is moving from reaction to observation. Instead of chasing clarity in the moment of confusion, it becomes healthier to pause and see the bigger pattern. Are you consistently feeling anxious, uncertain, or overanalyzing? Or is there space for calm, mutual understanding? This kind of reflection helps reduce emotional impulsiveness. It creates room to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting immediately. And in emotionally complex dynamics, that pause often prevents misunderstandings from turning into unnecessary disconnection over time. A mid-video call to reflect is really about shifting attention from reacting emotionally in the moment to understanding the pattern you are part of. In many emotionally complex dynamics, especially where one person tends to pull back and the other tends to reach forward, reactions can become automatic. Someone feels distance and immediately tries to fix it, clarify it, or bring things back to how they were before. But this reaction, while natural, can sometimes intensify the very distance they are trying to close. Reflection helps interrupt that cycle. Instead of immediately sending another message or overthinking what went wrong, it creates a pause where you observe what is actually happening over time rather than focusing on a single moment. It also helps you notice your own emotional state. If you consistently feel anxious, uncertain, or like you are chasing clarity, that is important information. It is not about labeling anyone as right or wrong, but about recognizing whether the connection is creating emotional stability or emotional tension. This pause also allows you to understand that not every silence or delay requires an immediate response. Sometimes people need space to process internally, and sometimes you need space to avoid reacting from fear or assumption. The goal of this reflection is not to disconnect, but to respond with more awareness. When you stop reacting impulsively and start observing patterns, you give yourself a clearer sense of whether the connection is balanced or becoming emotionally one-sided over time. Misinterpretation in relationships often happens when actions are seen only from the surface and not from the emotional state behind them. With avoidant individuals, this becomes even more common because their way of handling emotions is quieter and less expressive. Something as simple as needing space, responding slowly, or becoming less talkative can easily be misunderstood as disinterest or rejection. In reality, many of these behaviors are linked to how they manage emotional overload. When they feel overwhelmed, they don't always communicate that directly. Instead, they step back to regain internal balance. But because they don't always explain this process, the other person is left trying to interpret silence or distance without context. This is where the trap happens. The mind naturally tries to fill in missing information, and often it fills it with fear-based assumptions. A delayed reply becomes, "they don't care anymore." A quiet phase becomes, "they are losing interest." Over time, these interpretations can create emotional stress that wasn't originally intended by the avoidant person. On the avoidant side, they may not realize how strongly their silence is being interpreted. To them, it may feel like a normal pause for emotional regulation, but to the other person, it can feel like a withdrawal of connection. This mismatch creates tension on both sides. One side feels pressured to respond, the other feels pressured to explain. Without awareness, both people start reacting to assumptions instead of reality. Understanding this pattern helps reduce unnecessary emotional escalation and allows space for clearer, calmer communication over time. The push-pull cycle in relationships often happens when two different emotional needs collide at the same time. One person seeks closeness to feel secure, while the other feels overwhelmed when closeness becomes too intense too quickly. This creates a repeating pattern where connection increases for a short time, then suddenly decreases when emotional pressure builds. For avoidant individuals, closeness can feel comforting at first, but if it becomes emotionally demanding, their system starts to feel overstimulated. They may not consciously decide to pull away, but they begin to create distance through reduced communication, less emotional sharing, or needing more personal space. This is their way of regaining internal balance. On the other side, the person who values connection often feels confused by this shift. When things feel good and close, they naturally want to maintain or deepen that connection. So when distance appears, they may respond by reaching out more, asking more questions, or trying to restore the closeness they just experienced. This is where the cycle intensifies. The more one person reaches forward, the more the other feels pressure. The more pressure they feel, the more they withdraw. And the more they withdraw, the more anxiety builds in the other person, leading to even stronger attempts to reconnect. Over time, this rhythm can become exhausting for both sides if it is not understood. It is not about lack of care, but about mismatched emotional pacing. Without awareness, both people end up reacting to fear instead of understanding the pattern that is actually driving the distance and closeness shifts in the relationship. Healthy distance in relationships is often misunderstood, especially when emotions are involved. Many people assume that closeness must always look like constant communication, immediate responses, and emotional availability at all times. But in reality, sustainable connection often depends on how well both people respect each other's need for space. For avoidant individuals, distance is not always a sign of disinterest. It can be a way to reset emotionally, process feelings internally, and return to the relationship with a clearer mindset. When this need for space is respected instead of challenged, it reduces internal pressure and helps prevent withdrawal from becoming permanent. When someone responds to distance with patience rather than urgency, it changes the emotional environment. Instead of feeling chased or overwhelmed, the avoidant person feels less pressure to retreat further. This creates a more balanced dynamic where connection can exist without emotional overload. Healthy distance also protects the other person's emotional stability. It gives them room to reflect instead of reacting impulsively out of anxiety or fear. When both people allow space without interpreting it as abandonment, the relationship becomes less reactive and more grounded. The key idea here is that connection does not disappear because of space. In many cases, space actually helps maintain connection by preventing emotional burnout. It allows both individuals to return to interaction with more clarity rather than pressure. Over time, Relationships that respect boundaries tend to feel more stable, not because distance replaces closeness, but because it supports a form of closeness that is not forced, not rushed, and not dependent on constant reassurance to feel secure. In the end, relationships with avoidant individuals are not about chasing harder or withdrawing completely, but about understanding emotional pacing. When pressure replaces patience, distance often grows silently. But when space is respected and emotional intensity is balanced, connection has room to stabilize instead of collapse. It is not about changing who someone is, but about recognizing how they process closeness and overwhelm differently. What feels like rejection on the surface is often self-regulation underneath, and what feels like silence is sometimes just an attempt to regain emotional control. When both sides stop reacting out of fear and start responding with awareness, the cycle of push and pull begins to soften. And in that space, connection becomes less about intensity and more about understanding what allows it to actually last.